Okay, so thank you everyone for joining this session. This is the IT careers panel. So just to kind of get a few things going here to start, I wanted to make sure that as each of you gets going here, that I'll be moderating this session for now. So as we go through these opening remarks and talking with everyone here. Hopefully each of our speakers and our panel are going to be able to do introductions, because I will do a terrible job if I try to do it myself. But I think that these individuals will do a great job going through things. I think the general plan is for this session is that I will be watching chat. So please feel free to add any questions you may have there. If there are points where obviously the panelists want you to engage with them, feel free to, you can unmute to do so at that time. In the meantime, though, I'll make sure I collect questions and sort of interject where appropriate to bring up those questions to the panel as well. So I guess without further ado, would any of you like to kick off introductions and start things off?
Yeah, I'll start it off. So welcome, everybody. This is our careers panel and doesn't have a fancy name and didn't have a great description, but a whole bunch of you came anyway. So what are we here for? I organized this panel because career is obviously important to all of us, and I've been talking to different people who are different stages in their career and different parts of the university, and everyone has so much to contribute. I thought we'd put together a panel to talk about different aspects of our career, and I'm not going to be a main speaker today. I'm going to be a moderator for the panel itself, although, of course, Al's going to moderate the whole thing. So I'm going to kick it off and ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, and then each of them are going to give a little bit of their journey, their career journey, and then we're just going to have a discussion, a conversation with all of you about careers and aspects. So I'm going to call upon Sabrina to kick things off.
I'm chuckling because
just your short intro for right now.
Thank you. I am Sabrina Messer. I currently work in DoIT in Application Infrastructure Services, and my official role is an IT portfolio manager.
And Sean.
Hello, I'm Sean Bossinger. I am the CIO and Director of IT at the UW School of Veterinary Medicine.
Julian.
Hey, I'm Julian Vandenberg. I am a software engineer on application infrastructure services as well in the enterprise integration team.
And Salima.
Hello, Salima Kareemboy. I am a senior analyst and Tableau developer with the Office for the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration.
And I actually didn't introduce myself. For those who care, I'm David Parter. I'm the IT director at Computer Sciences. I'm going to go in the same order. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm going to start with Sean. Sean, you want to give us your journey?
Sure. I have 5 minutes, right?
Yes, you do.
Now I only have 4 minutes and 45 seconds. That's a good stall tactic. So thank you, David. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your panel today. As I described my position earlier, for the past 2.5 years, I've been the CIO and Director of IT for the UW School of Veterinary Medicine. And in that role, I oversee IT strategy for the school and also IT operations for the school and also for the UW Veterinary Care Teaching Hospital. As you might imagine, that it's kind of a combined role between those two facilities. They have very different missions, although they do tend to support one another. And it's been very exciting. So prior to that, I was an assistant director with user services in the Division of Information Technology, where my functional area was leading and managing the DoIT help desk. Before that, I was in a similar position for 8 years for Florida International University in Miami, also at their central IT help desk. So I've been working in higher ed for about the last 18, 19 years, and have focused the latter part of my IT career in the higher ed space. primarily because I believe in the mission. I believe in the mission of higher education. I believe in the life-changing things that we do. And that's why I bring my talents here to bear. Prior to those leadership roles in higher education, and prior to entering the higher education sector, I actually worked in private industry as a managing systems engineer, where I both managed systems engineers and also provided system engineering. So if you look, I know you don't have access to my resume, but if you look at, if you happen to see my resume, one of the technical certifications that I carry is, and don't laugh, I'm a certified Novell engineer, for those of you who remember Novell. And I went through the CNE training program. Yeah, so I was in that role for about 5 years. Prior to that, I worked in the healthcare industry as both an IT project manager and as a help desk analyst. And then prior to that jump, I also was a help desk analyst in a life insurance company, credit life insurance company down in Miami, Florida, actually a very large company, Fortis Insurance Group, and also worked as a help desk analyst for a hospital in Miami and also for Vitas Healthcare. And prior to stepping into any of those technical roles, I majored in the very technical degree of German language and literature. I actually graduated in German language and literature from the University of Florida, but a lot of my out of classroom focus was on building my technical knowledge through running computer labs for the university that I attended, and also working as a kind of half computer tech, half mechanical engineering intern for the local nuclear power plant south of Miami.
That's a very interesting combination. German, nuclear engineering, nuclear power plant, and IT. Before we go on to everyone else's journey, how did those three work together, do you think, to get you where you are today?
So, it's interesting. The one thing that I really took from all of that, including the German degree, because part of my German degree was also learning how to teach people German. I would say the kernel that connects all of those, or the thread that connected all of those things, is actually a strong desire and strong leaning towards what I would consider to be exceptional customer service and serving people. So if you look at service as a broad concept, serving people in helping them learn German, serving people at the nuclear power plant I worked at, helping mechanical engineers learn AutoCAD on a 386 compact machine, and helping students in the computer labs that I happened to work at when I was at the University of Florida. All of that, the thread that joins all of that is that concept of service. And, just kind of, I picked up computers as I went along, but the core foundation around all of that was service.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Okay, I'm going to pick on someone. Salima, you want to tell us your journey?
Yes. Yeah, so for me, it's interesting listening to Sean. I keep on thinking I've been on campus for 15 years. So I've been going back 15 years, but it actually goes back beyond that. And I kind of go back to, there's a story of Steve Jobs that talks about you wouldn't have fonts in the Mac if he hadn't taken the calligraphy class in college. And I think of that often, because I started off in business and finance, accounting background, undergrad. I thought I was going to teach math. I had a minor in mathematics and thought I was going to go and teach math in higher ed. So I did grad school for master's in arts and teaching, and sort of, was working always in like CUNY Mutual I worked at, and I worked at Wells Fargo in Minnesota for a while, back in the subprime time when we were underwriting all those loans. And so, accounting, finance, banking, a lot of that was my original background post-undergrad. And, came to Madison and started working at CUNA for a while, and life sort of happened and came into this space of the university. And I actually started as a financial specialist part-time in a project role in L&S. And so that's sort of where my career started, at least on campus. And I've worked as business analyst, accountant roles, and then at DoIT as well as a data and metric specialist. And they all had a common theme of accounting, budgeting, finance, working with grant research. I kind of touched all aspects within the decentralized roles. And I sort of morphed into these little pieces that I noticed now in hindsight that kept cropping up in my career that dealt with IT and automation, creating efficiencies, sort of that Six Sigma roles of how do you create processes that are like really good, and worked at finding career opportunities that I wanted to always challenge myself. And there was this point that sort of accounting got a little boring for me. And I knew that I was like, well, what am I going to do? And I had some really great supervisors and mentors along the way that I became really strategic in my path, and what led me to my current position, where I'm working in Tableau as a developer with BCFA's office, and stuff that I had done also at DoIT within Tableau as well, just recognizing not just the accounting aspects of things, but really wanting to get answers to people faster. And I sort of made sure that I was connecting with the right people and became really, really strategic in how I met people and sort of put myself out there, making sure that I understood some of the, your job really well, but then how do you go above and beyond? And I was sort of led on this path of learning how to lead from where you're at and getting in touch with the right mentors and sponsors, learning how to be more active in your career, being very strategic on the projects you take. And across my career, it just sort of worked its way where now when I look at the story of Steve Jobs, I can say, oh, I know I was, sort of developing for the role I'm in now. And you kind of don't always know it right away. So I attribute my career, the way I describe it at least, is like a jungle gym. You kind of go in different directions, and it's not always like a ladder necessarily. So I didn't always know what I wanted to do, but I do now look back at, in hindsight, of things that came up along the way where I was introduced to the concept of big data or data analytics, and what does it mean to data warehouse and architecture, and and then being exposed when I got a role at DoIT, and just the technology that I was exposed to took me on a completely different trajectory than I would have thought of. And so it's been really interesting. But yeah, I've kind of been all over the place on campus, and now in a role where learning more about the central campus level, because I've done a lot of stuff within the decentral roles on campus over the years. So that's my leadership journey.
Well, thank you. I love that image of the jungle gym. And I'm just curious, which part of the jungle gym gave you the most thrills?
Ooh, I would probably say, well, some of it, I mean, right now I am actually in a master's of data science. And so right now I'd say that that's been an interesting space to be in, to have this finance background, some math background, of course, but then learning all this stuff now that I haven't really been exposed to in my career otherwise, but being able to actually do it and understand it has been really, really interesting and fun. And historically, I think it's always been the jumps in different jobs, because I think whether it's even a project or a job, but looking at something with new eyes and seeing if you can figure it out, it's not always easy, but I find that those are like the best things that you can do in your career, is when it looks really hard and you actually step up and try to figure it out. It works really well and you learn a ton. You don't know it at the time, but eventually in hindsight.
Great. Thank you. Julian, you're up.
Awesome. Well, my origins sound very similar to Salima. I also come from an accounting, finance, businessy background. I studied finance in my undergrad and started off in the accounting department at an automotive supplier in Detroit in accounts receivable. And so I was doing AR processing. So a lot of that was Excel work and a little bit on the tedious side. But what I really enjoyed was the putting together kind of a Rube Goldberg machine of formulas and that kind of thing. And it was really satisfying to just kind of dip my feet into that. And again, I kind of hit a tedious wall where I branched into or expanded into exploring macros. And that was kind of my first real programming project. And it was immensely satisfying to one, to make something that, reduced a 6-hour job to like a 5-minute job. But the other equally satisfying part of that was that tool that I made, which I'm sure looking back at it now there's probably plenty of room for improvement, but at the time it was still, it was useful for a few other teams too. And so I kind of took that feeling of hey, I really like making this tool that does some stuff with some data and saves a lot of people a lot of time. And I thought that was a lot more interesting than the actual accounting stuff that I was working on. So I kind of used that as some of my guiding principles for my next job, which was a financial analyst at a bank, again in Detroit. And that one I went into expressing interest in the more technical side of things. So at that one, I was responsible for managing a few larger macros. And then I also did my first foray into SQL at that point. I wrote a couple SQL reports. And again, it was the kind of thing that just saved a lot of time. You weren't having to pull huge data sets and copy and paste them from one workbook to another. It was always refreshable, and just kind of that, again, kind of incremental technical step was really exciting to me. And I saw the value in it compared to the, I guess, existing kind of the processes that had just been as they had always been. And so again, taking that as my driving interest, I moved to my next job in the accounting team at Epic on a sub team. It was an IT, kind of like a shadow IT group, where I was on a sub team of data warehouse developers, and I did a lot of SQL data warehouse and ETL development, with the kind of overarching team goal of bringing analytics capabilities to other people in the accounting and finance teams. So we also hosted some training for tools like Power BI, and then kind of some of Excel's more advanced capabilities. And that was, again, really exciting. And that was my first dip into one, working on a technical team with, I guess, multiple technical people working on the same project, which was great because then the scope of the projects was a lot larger and more impactful. And then also using some more modern tools at that point. That's where I learned Git for the first time. That was great. And had some success there for a long time. And again, I just kept focusing on how much I enjoyed the technical, building things part of that job. And decided at that point I wanted to make the switch fully into software development. So that's what brought me to UW and to do it. I'm mostly self-taught in the technical area, though I took one computer science class at UW right before I joined UW. That was a lot of fun. The the self-taught learning path it's really great because you can just pick your direction and learn things as you need them. I do think it's a little bit challenging because in the current landscape, there's just hundreds of free courses and free resources on any given topic. So it can be easy to get overwhelmed and focus too much on like picking the absolute best way to learn XYZ thing, when really it's probably more valuable to just jump in and do it. So I do enjoy that like structured learning approach too. And I find myself kind of going back and forth when I need to, quickly just learn how to do the bare minimum in some area. The kind of free self-guided approach is often good enough, but I always am kind of thinking about my next like formal learning path. So probably looking at taking more computer science courses here in the evenings at UW. And yeah, so this is, I think, my 9-month mark here in Do It. And it's been great learning exactly the stuff that I'm hoping to learn. And yeah, that's been my journey.
Well, thank you. Sabrina, you get to round us out.
Okay. Thank you for having me speak today. In terms of where I am and how I got here in my journey, as I said, I'm an IT portfolio manager, which probably means nothing. It's a combination of words. And I keep it generic because I have the luxury, the privilege of working on so many different projects and tasks and services and programs in my current role. And I really enjoy it and I'm very fortunate. So what that really means is, for example, right now I'm on a bit of a special assignment helping to lead some cybersecurity efforts on campus. I just highlight that because I never thought I'd be really very close to cybersecurity. And so that's been one of my other interesting journeys as I reflect on my career, how many different domains I've learned that I never thought I would even touch. I never thought I would be in a group of application developers. And so it kind of brings me to my career has been a bit of walk the path / junk drawer. There's been interesting opportunities that I pursue to support the mission of the university and to help people. But I never quite know where it's going to come and when it's going to come. In terms of kind of what brought me here, I've served a lot of different roles. Graphic designer, copy editor, research intern. I've managed help desks. I've been an independent consultant. I worked for McBurney as a note taker when I was a student on campus. 12 years in distributed between full-time employment and student employment, and about 5 years now at Do It as a full-time staff member. I worked at Edgewood College for a while where I was a science and grants coordinator, a building manager, a health and safety manager. And in reflecting on all of this and listening to Sean and Salima today, the thread that I've been able to come to is service, to help people think differently. I serve the institution, I serve the groups, but ultimately what I'm doing is somehow just getting folks to think differently. I used to call it next to the left when I was younger and didn't have as maybe a refined vocabulary as I think I do now, emphasis on think. But it's something that I can bring different threads together. In my role, I have to see the big picture, see all the details at the same time, see different dependencies and connection points, and highlight that to folks and work together to forge a new path. So I'm constantly just trying to come up with a new way to look at things and move things forward. In terms of some strange bumps in my path, I was unemployed for about 2 years, and that was stressful and strange, and you definitely reassess. I certainly did. What do I need? What's my why? At that point, I needed money. Now I can say I need to be engaged and have purpose and follow the mission. So I call that out because knowing the why is what I would advise myself at every point in my life and my career, know why I'm doing something. Another point was I thought I was going to be a professor. And so I did pursue that academic track. I have a master's degree in architectural history and visual culture studies. And that was actually the point that opened up this think differently for me. When I was in my undergrad, it was more rote learning. Here's the lesson, here's the agenda, here's what you need, just all of it, it's laid out. This is what you need to learn to pass the next class. In grad school, we were a bunch of folks in a room with someone who knew more about some things and encouraged to talk and just bring ideas around. And it was a bit of power dynamic was reduced. It was opened up in terms of bringing ideas to the table. And I loved that. And like, how do I bring that to everywhere I get to go, that open discussion, and make people feel as though they can bring ideas to the table? So that was maybe the one point where I can say I knew what I wanted work to look like for me. I think that's what I have to share right now. It's been a winding path. It's fun. I enjoy it.
Well, thank you. Al has a couple questions for the panel.
So yeah, thank you very much for sharing your career journeys you've had so far. And I think it's really fascinating. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, and I think this is sort of sparked in my head based on what Julian had said, but I think this is obviously applies to each of you to feel free to explain for your own experiences what this was like. But I'm just kind of curious what the percentage you'd say of your skills that you have today came from being self-taught versus maybe some form of higher formal education. And I mean, Julian, if you want to start that off, or if the others want to have some thoughts and add them in as well, feel free.
Sure. So I guess with a finance degree, I took a lot of business classes, a lot of accounting and a lot of econ. The business classes were very, you kind of can't get away from the like people-oriented aspect of business anything. So, and I think that's something that's probably less overlooked now than it used to be, but the importance of people skills and cooperation and teamwork. I would actually say that was kind of a something I picked up in my formal education. And then on the technical side, I would say pretty much entirely self-taught, with the exception of like object-oriented programming, which was like the main focal point of what I learned in my UW course. So kind of the separation of hard skills and soft skills there for me.
Great, thanks. Anyone else in the panel that wants to add their own experience to that?
Yeah, I guess I'd say, I mean, similar, self-taught. I sort of had to figure out how Tableau worked, I remember. And now it's probably around 65% easy of self-taught. Definitely a lot of the business stuff falls in without question, people skills, soft skills. I would probably add some of, in your career, you tend to also take some professional development along the way. And some of the leadership courses that I took really, really made a huge difference in learning how to lead and not feeling that you needed it to be a formal title. So
that's really good. Thank you. Anyone else? No pressure.
I'll just add that I'm probably 80% self-taught, 20% certs, formal learning that relate directly to the job. And I always wonder if I should be at a different balance and if I should pursue something. And then I realized, wait, I actually kind of did that on the job. Do I need to pursue a formal path or not? So 80-20.
Yeah, I would say mine falls in line with pretty much everyone else here, especially when you're talking about technical knowledge. Technical knowledge, I am virtually totally self-taught, with the exception of a couple of programming courses that I happened to take when I was in university. I'm pretty much taught myself, and yes, even for my certified Novell engineer, taught myself the skills I needed for that, but also had a lot of help from other, sorry about that, help from other engineers on the job to help learn that.
Great, thank you.
I'm going to jump in and answer that as well, because I think there's some very interesting, that's such a great question. So I have a degree in computer science, and I think that the formal learning gives us a foundation. And, we can call it self-taught, but as Sean said, I've learned so much from so many people along the way. It's our experience and our experience with others. And I've gotten, someone showed me one little thing and I've used that over and over and built on that. And hopefully I've trained others. Hopefully I've shared that with others. But it's that experience building on our foundation and being open to learning from others and also just trying things. Al, you had another question for us?
I have a second question. I could hold it and wait. It's a little bit more cliche, I have to admit. So that could be one to save for later if you have other things you want to jump into. What do you think?
Okay, I will jump into one of my prepared questions for the panel. And anyone can start. What are some things or advice that you now would want your younger you to know? Someone's got to have an answer.
So I would have told myself, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's the thing that has helped me so much, and I just wish I knew it sooner.
I would tell my younger self, keep track of the successes. It's hard to forget what went well, especially when you need a pick-me-up. And when you have to, when you choose to move on to a different job and you need to write that resume and cover letter, oh my gosh, is it hard if you need to think back over years? So I would tell my younger self to write down what I did and why did it matter?
I think I would say that I would tell myself that a lot of things just take a long time to learn. Technical things just tend to be complicated. And it's not, depending on the domain you're looking at, it's going to be not a matter of a couple hours until you pick something up, but it could very well be days or weeks. And just as a little secondary thing there, kind of an unrelated point, but understanding the use cases of what you're making or who you're making things for is also very important, just to keep your efforts focused on what your end result will be.
Sean, any advice for your younger you?
Yeah, I think I would probably have told myself to relax. I had it in my mind because I've been using computers since I was 10. I'm 52, so I've been using computers since I was 10. Unlike all of you out there who had Commodore 64s, my parents didn't spring for that. They sprung for the Radio Shack color computer. I don't know why. It doesn't matter at this point. I still have that computer. It doesn't work, but that's okay. But from that point, everyone always kind of pushed me towards computer science. And I tried my darndest to become a computer science major at the University of Florida. There were 3 tracks that I could have gone into: computer engineering, business computing, or pure computer science in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And I bloodied my head on the brick wall of trying to make it through the math courses that would have gotten me into any of those three areas, and couldn't. German was not necessarily a backup degree for me, because I do love the German language. I love German literature. But I would tell myself to relax. The major oftentimes doesn't matter. It's the lessons that you take away from when you go through that education that really matter. And that's a lesson that I still learn and embrace to today.
Thank you. Hopefully Al might have caught some more, but I did see one question in chat. Stefan wants to know how you share your knowledge with others.
So one of the things that I'm able to do in my current role is I have several different kinds of technologists that work directly with me on the team here at the School of Veterinary Medicine. And sharing knowledge is a two-way street. Obviously, I continue to learn things to this day about technology that I don't know. I don't need to know everything there is to know about the nuts and bolts of the technology that we have in place here. My team teaches me. And what I'm able to teach them is how that technology and how the use of that technology connects to the mission and the vision of our dean as we execute on the mission of the school and the hospital here. So that's something that I'm able to bring to the table to my technologists, so that, yes, they're deeply interested in the technology, but often every single one of them works here for a reason. And every single one of them could probably go elsewhere and make more money, but they're here for a reason. And helping them understand what that reason keeps them engaged. And, you know, that knowledge transfer is a two-way street. I do that through engagement.
I will add that I similarly engagement plus one on the engagement, sharing my knowledge through sort of coaching and mentoring conversations. I found in my career that what may start as a conversation about a particular topic kind of takes winding roads. And as I'm asking questions and listening and asking follow-up questions and engaging with someone, again, it's like new ideas come out and there's different pathways, different options. So I'm able to share my knowledge when I have an opportunity to listen and talk. And it usually looks like coaching.
Julian, Salima, any thoughts on sharing knowledge?
Yeah, so I'm also kind of keeping an eye out or an ear out for whenever I work on something that led me to pick up a little thing that may not be in wide use in our portfolio or on our team yet. Or I guess, for example, most recently, I was working on a small front end change. And the team that I'm on is kind of split between front end and back end developers, but we're trying to do a kind of a cross training initiative. And I had to make some minor change. I forget what it was, but this was kind of at the onset of that. And I scheduled like a little 15 or 20-minute meeting. This is optional. And just kind of walked people through how I approach the change, what resources I use to figure out how to do it. All the little things I had to take into consideration. And I think that was just a kind of a nice environment. It, you know, gives people a chance to step away from like being, well, it's almost like taking a break and then like learning something in your break, but it's a good opportunity to just kind of informally like talk about why you did a certain thing a certain way. Oftentimes it's, Sean, like you said, it's kind of a two-way street. So even though I may be the one who did the thing, I can still learn something from someone else who's there who may have done it a different way. And I think there's a lot of value in that back and forth type of setting.
Yeah, I think I'd add for me at least, it's been very project specific, trying to get to a common understanding of things that I'm now learning within a formalized course material. Example would be data warehousing, where I recognize that sometimes people on campus don't all know in the business world what that really means, and being able to create a common denominator of I have both feet in both doors. I understand a little bit of both now, and being able to communicate that when there's a specific project that comes up And we're talking about, Excel version control. If we have so many versions of Excel, how can we stop this from happening? And it's like, aha, there is a way that we are planning to get to. And this is why, and being able to explain it when the opportunities arise. So I think they don't always come up all the time, regularly, but when they do, they can really be pivotal in changing and helping people understand a world that could exist as we shift in ways on campus in the future of how we look at data. So yeah, for me, it's project specific, and I find opportunities to talk about it.
Okay, I'm trying to decide which question to go with. So some of you mentioned this earlier. So if you could pick one or two professional development programs or training or activities that you've participated in that made a difference to you, tell us a little bit about it, and also, how did you know to take that, to participate? Did someone advise you to do it? Did you find it on your own? And just whoever wants to start. And if no one wants to start, I'm going to ask Sabrina. Sabrina?
Sure. I have I think it's called a certificate in project management from Fluno and the Center for Professional Executive Development. And I call it out because it's a series of classes, and I am one of two people who took the longest time to complete it. I think I was 12 and a half years to complete like 6 or 8 courses. And the reason I call it out is because the act of continuing to pursue something and learn different angles of it over a long period of time was the most rewarding. I don't know that any of the specific content, any of the specific courses like drove me forward at that moment more than the experience of having a class at a time that made sense with people that I could talk about. The need was there. So certainly adult learning, the immediate need and applying the material. So in terms of how I learned about it, and this is where I might bleed into advice for managers, which was a question I heard at some point preparing for today. I took a class that was opened up by Bruce Maas, gathering business requirements for all of campus. It was like, here's this open class, hundreds of people get to take it. And it's kind of stimulated my interest in following this track and getting the certificate. Every time I took a course, I had to ask. I'm not going to say plead, but every course I had to provide more rationale than seemed necessary at the time. And it was through different supervisors I took these. And so what I can say now from reflecting on that is don't make it hard. Like, don't make it hard on ourselves. Managers don't make it hard on us. Identify ideas. Now I have I'm surrounded by folks who are identifying opportunities, and hey, maybe that sounds interesting or that. But throughout the course of that particular experience, it was me driving it, and very rewarding, but it would have been great along the way also to have folks suggesting other things that could have helped. So a couple of answers there to your one question.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on professional development? If not, I'm going to go with what Sabrina just brought up in one of our other prepared questions. Without throwing anyone under the bus, what would your advice be to managers?
Ooh, could I go?
Go for it.
So my advice to managers would be to understand and grasp the significant differences between leading and managing. I think oftentimes managers are put in a position where they're leading and also managing, but I don't know that people very frequently explain to people who come into a manager role what the difference is between leading and managing. And that's something I've picked up through multiple different leadership classes, but also through personal reading, and actually picked it up through personal reading before I went through any leadership classes. But it's, you know, it's one of the mainstay lessons that you take away from something like the More IT Leaders Program or the Center for Creative Leadership's Leadership Managing Program, where they talk to you about the difference. And it's a very simple concept that once you realize it, I think it makes your job as a manager, or your job as a potential leader, even if you're not a manager, because even if you are the most frontline of frontline people, you can lead from where you are, you know, knowing what the differences are between leadership and management.
I think to add, for me, I think it's having managers who are open to both give and receive feedback regularly. I think it's so important in the growth of the employee. And I think one of the best managers I had, actually, you know, I got hired, and on the first day, like that onboarding month, I think within that first couple of weeks, was told that this is like a 3-year job and we need to be able to grow you up and out. And I had never had a manager supervisor try to get rid of me in that way, like right away. But it was very, very strategic because they had a specific idea of the role. They knew where you're going to plateau, and they knew that the point of, you know, that sweet spot when you're going to need to learn how to get to the next job and what skills you're going to need. They work with you to get them along the way. And so, and that comes through feedback, in my opinion. So it worked quite well. It was hard at the time to hear, but it worked out. Yeah. So managers who can give feedback, really, really helpful.
I'll kind of reiterate a point that you mentioned in there, but as a manager, encouraging like the growth mindset and learning, I found is super valuable. And I've been really lucky because I think all but my first manager have been, have kind of adopted that and encouraged that. And to be on the employee side of that, it just, I mean, it feels very fulfilling. You end up contributing more. And I don't see any downsides to it really. So I think that's just a really significant thing that managers can either do or continue to do.
Sabrina, any advice for managers?
I'm pausing to find my words. I think it's try not to have it be such a power relationship. It's already someone, you report to someone, that adds a dynamic. Understand yourself and your staff member and find the way to really connect and communicate so that you can understand managing and leading, and promote growth mindset and understand the role and the person. Try to bring it back down to the two people in the relationship and not the roles that they're serving, would be my advice.
Thank you. Al, do you want to ask a question, or anyone else in the room want to put more questions in chat?
Sure. Yeah. And just a great reminder, David, as you mentioned that we're about 11 minutes out from the end of the session. So if you have questions, just please feel free to drop them in chat or however you'd like to. I would love to ask just something, because it's sort of, you know, maybe a little reflection of my experience in the past and certain things. I'm curious if throughout, as you've seen your careers grow and change, when those changes occurred, how, you know, have there been any that maybe didn't feel like positive moves at the time? And maybe since then, you feel like, no, this was the right thing, this was worth it. Not to call out anything specific necessarily, but just, I think it's notable that there's sometimes, you have to sort of make a leap of faith. I think when you make these changes, when you decide, I'm going to learn this new thing, and how much of that sort of trepidation came into sort of your experiences, I'd be curious to know. Do I have to pick on somebody? Yeah, because I could do that too if you want.
I was just going to briefly mention when I joined what was called the middleware group, and I'm happy to call out that fantastic group of people. That was so scary, so knowledgeable, such knowledgeable individuals. I'm stepping into support a technical space that I don't understand. And that was nerve-wracking. And again, it's a great group of people that helped me to serve the university. But that was a scary move.
If anyone else wants to, they are welcome to as well. Otherwise, we have another question as well from Ken in chat. Seeing none, I guess I think it'd be great to bring up Ken's question too. He wanted to know, just, not wanting to be pessimistic here or anything like that, but he's curious maybe what professional development was, that was a path that you'd recommend people not take.
So I don't have a specific professional development program that I would point out here for people not to take. But what I would do is and this is probably more geared towards managers, when you're having the conversation with employees to try to figure out with them what professional development they're seeking, understanding first what their career goals are, understanding first what their passions are, understanding first what drives them, I think is key in helping them find a professional development program that fits them. So I have a couple of colleagues, and I won't name names. I have a couple of colleagues whom I've worked with here at UW-Madison who pan the More IT Leaders program. I have other colleagues, and I'm among them, who sing the laurels of the More IT Leaders program. And I think oftentimes the professional development program that you go through is, whether it's successful or not, is oftentimes really, really based on your investment in that program. So I don't know that there's any particular program that I could call out. But yeah, I think it's a conversation between you and you in particular, you who are the one who is going to be going through that professional development program. I think you need to ask yourself a question as to whether the content of that program, as it's listed in whatever guide you're looking at, or as you're understanding whatever that program is where you truly want to go and where you truly want to spend your cycles learning. Because all professional development's an investment of time, in or out of the classroom.
Well said. Does anyone else want to also address that one? There's also another question as well, I see from Roger.
So I think to piggyback off of what Sean said, what works for one might not work for another. And similar to Sean, I've seen people take various different types of courses, both formalized and informal. And it's up to the person and their commitment, who's taking the courses, and the support of their managers to ensure that it is aligning with what their future goals are and career trajectory. So I think it is important as a manager to make sure that you're aware of it and that the employee is continuously progressing towards it, and checking in with them regularly, because sometimes at some point it becomes, I just keep on taking the next class, but making sure that they still want to invest in that, their time and the cost, if there is one associated with it.
Great points. All right. I'll also then jump in here. We've also got one from Roger that I think is another good one. We have just knowing from a practical standpoint, is it difficult being with UW, knowing that you could make more money in the private sector? Besides believing in the mission, why do you stay with UW and not pursue maybe another career location?
I can answer that one. I just moved here from Epic, which is like the opposite, and not to speak negatively about it, because I've got, I enjoyed my time there, but I moved for a reason. And at UW just does a really significantly unique job of maintaining an atmosphere of that growth mindset that I mentioned earlier, and also being very people oriented. We deliver a significant product of higher education and research, but it definitely doesn't seem like it comes at the cost of employee relationships and advancement and that kind of thing. And I think having been in both positions in within the last 12 months, I would say it is not that difficult to reconcile that. Personally, anyway.
Great. Any other additions to that?
Yeah, I would follow up with what Julian said too. I agree definitely with what he said, but it's what drives me to come into the office every day is I work with the smartest people on the planet, and they're good people too. And I'm not necessarily talking about the faculty and researchers here. I'm talking about all of you. I know that I don't call people, so I don't pick up the phone and call, but I know I can get on Teams or I can get on Slack and message people questions, and people will hear me and come back with, helpful knowledge. And I have never not been able to find the help I need to succeed here.
Well said. Any other closing remarks? We've got about 3 minutes remaining.
So, Sean, panel, as Al said, so what's your wrap up message about your career or about other people's career? Anything?
So, I would say find what your passion is and do it. And relax into that, relax into finding what your passion is. You don't have to find it today. You don't have to find it tomorrow, but the sooner you find it, I think the happier you'll be.
I've got one I'd add too. Save the chat from this Zoom, because the amount of great feedback in there from everyone attending too has been really, really stellar. So a lot of really, really good calls in there.
I think I'd add, attach yourself to good people. From what Sean said, there are so many superstars on campus and do not be scared or nervous to reach out. People have been so amazing. They are always willing to help, and, talking to them or finding out opportunities. I know COVID, but as we move back and shift back into real life, it's like getting that cup of coffee and just reaching out to somebody and talking through a project you're on or that you're interested in doing, and where maybe you might be able to find others who are interested in the same things, and you'd be surprised. You're not the only one.
Julian, Sabrina?
Yeah, I guess my final little thought about where I am is it's a like very rewarding type of work to work in, or type of domain, in that you're always learning. I know that's kind of cliche to say at this point, but it's absolutely been true. You're always learning, and it's not just different. You're not only learning like new technologies, but you're learning about how other people have handled similar hurdles in the past. And there's just so much like history, kind of having a hard time phrasing it, but like so many new problems are being created, old problems are being solved. It's like just kind of this constant cycle of learning, but in a really fun, engaging way. And just kind of accepting that and leaning into that, I think is worth doing.
Sabrina, any final thoughts?
I just want to say thank you to everyone in this community. I think we've all expressed, this is why we're here. This is why we stay here. Thank you for helping me and others to learn and grow, and feel a sense of belonging, and serendipity. And I'm picking some values from the IT Connects group. So yeah, just thank you all for building this community.
And I want to thank all of you for serving on this panel and letting me ask you these questions, some of which you were prepped for, some of which you didn't know were coming. And thank you to everyone who attended and put such great questions and comments in chat.
Fantastic. And with that, we are kind of at time here. I just wanted to let everyone know that if you still have further questions, I'd say feel free to reach out to these folks and reach out to others in chat here and continue the conversation. We're going to have about a 15-minute break here. And then the next set of talks is going to be taking place at 3:15. One is the extension Internet and SharePoint Online, and the other one is the IT's role in data privacy. So thank you so much for being here for this panel.